Dennis O'Rourke.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. New Zealand First takes people smuggling and border control very seriously. We understand that New Zealand has international obligations for the fair and humane treatment of refugees, which we fully support. And we fully accept that this country has a culture which demands such treatment. New Zealand First does not believe that unfair or inhumane treatment should itself be used as a deterrent. But we do believe that people smugglers and false claimants for refugee status, or just simple queue jumpers, must see that this country will not allow the act of just getting on a ship or boat or aircraft and coming illegally to New Zealand will mean that this will result in admission to this country. That is the deterrent which we must project. Such people must understand that although they will be humanely treated here, they will be held in a secure facility and will not become free in New Zealand unless and until they achieve legal admission. And that must never simply be because they have arrived here. And none but the most clear and genuine cases of refugee status should be recognised according to internationally established norms and conventions. New Zealand cannot afford to be seen as a soft touch by would-be people smugglers or illegal immigrants. New Zealand First sees the secure detention of illegal immigrants, especially those in mass arrivals, should they occur, as being the paramount consideration in this matter. And, Mr Speaker, we in New Zealand First accept that there is in fact a risk that mass arrivals, as defined in the legislation, are possible here. It's occurred in Australia. We agree that for New Zealand, the risk is small for now. But what about next year, or indeed what about next month? While the risk is low, it is not acceptable for that risk to be ridiculed in the way that I've heard some members do. That, Mr Speaker, is simply foolish. Some members have spoken dismissively about how unlikely it is that boat people could arrive in New Zealand. But in fact, small vessels sail across the Tasman Sea with ease, and larger vessels have already attempted landings in Australia. Indeed, the use of aircraft with transoceanic capability are even more unlikely, but still possible for these people. Most New Zealanders do want this risk taken seriously, and we want to see adequate preparations made, both in terms of legislation and in terms of regulation and in terms of preparation of facilities, capable not just to ensure humane accommodation once a warrant is issued, but also detention in a secure way. It is unfortunate, I think, that Labour and the Greens do not seem to take these risks seriously enough. And we in New Zealand First think that National and Government in this bill is not doing enough about it either. As I have said, deterrence, in the way that I have described it, is an important element to discourage mass arrivals by boats and all vessels with the capability to reach New Zealand. Therefore, while the amendments proposed by this bill will be supported by New Zealand First, in principle they fail in one vital respect, that they will not mean that adequate secure facilities will be established to ensure secure detention for illegal mass arrivals should they occur. SOP 219 in the name of Winston Peters would have added the necessary additional provisions, and I'll refer to that again in a moment. But New Zealand First has the most consistent stance on border control of all political parties. We have what I would call a strict regime approach to the whole issue of immigration, which we think is currently far too lax in too many ways. It is not just about illegal immigrants, as I've said, but also in allowing a much too generous intake of family reunion and especially parent category migrants into New Zealand. Because of China's one-child policy, Chinese can make excessive use of the centre of gravity policy, allowing young, skilled Chinese immigrant couples, who we do want, to bring in both sets of parents, and we should place a country-specific gap on their numbers. Currently, the ratio is that these people are 120% of Chinese skilled immigrants, when the ratio for other countries is only around 24%. These older immigrants need only 10 years residence to get full New Zealand superannuation, and will also get the benefits of free health care, ACC and so on. So this government's policies about immigration generally, both in respect to illegal and legal immigration, is far too lax. This is not what New Zealanders want, and nobody could have any confidence in the immigration policies of Labour or the Greens either, if indeed they actually have comprehensive policy at all. But New Zealand First is especially concerned in respect of all cases of illegal entry, and more especially again if New Zealand is faced with illegal mass arrivals in the future. And if it means that perceived but not actual non-compliance with international convention is the result, then so be it, because we in New Zealand First see New Zealand's interests first and as the priority, rather than the soft approach which other parties would foist upon us. In this day and age, this matter is at the forefront of the protection of New Zealand and the integrity of our borders. New Zealand First will not tolerate that and will not accept the many and various excuses which some people give for their illegal entry. And we want to see the maximum effort made to fight back at illegal people trafficking with all the criminal usages which it involves. We also know that if we adopt this soft approach, we will not be doing enough to protect the lives of people who are the customers of those people traffickers. New Zealand First's hardline approach is the one we think which New Zealand should adopt. But New Zealand First is committed to meeting New Zealand's international obligations under the United Nations quota program of currently 750 people, less than 150 gifted for some reason to Australia. Illegal immigration puts strain on our ability to meet those obligations, and too many illegal arrivals are actually queue jumpers who must not be rewarded at the expense of those who follow the correct process. The bill, Mr Speaker, assumes that New Zealand authorities have the capacity required to deal with a mass arrival as defined in the bill. This means the relevant government departments and agencies must have the capacity to set up detention centres for illegal refugees soon after their arrival. There is no guarantee that such systems or plans are in place, and the bill in its present form places no expectations on the authorities to develop them. So New Zealand First deplores the government's failure to support Winston Peters' SOP, which would have ensured that proper systems are in place to deal with mass arrivals should they happen. Mr Speaker, parties should set aside their differences and do what is in the national interest. And our national interest is in making the protection of our national borders paramount. Our national interest is in making the protection of our immigration system paramount. And our national interest is in making the protection of New Zealand's international reputation also paramount. New Zealand's interests require nothing less. Mr Speaker, this bill fails to deliver sufficiently a robust approach, so New Zealand First will vote against it. We want a much better bill than this.
Chris Ockenvold.
Mr Speaker, thank you, and I stand to speak in favour